Thank you for tuning in today to the Wild Sage Society. I'm sitting with Barbara With. She is an international peace activist, award-winning author, publisher, psychic channel, composer, performer, workshop facilitator, and inspirational speaker. She is the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, a revolutionary way to resolve conflicts of the psyche based on her work channeling. Welcome, Barbara. I'm so excited you are here.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcie.
First, I want to know, I want to dive into, how did you know that you were channeling Einstein?
Well, it's kind of a long story that I try my best to encapsulate. So forgive me if I start at the beginning,
I
not
love it.
like
No, I'm here for all of it.
okay, it's like I was born to a poor sharecropper. No, no.
Yes, go there.
Okay, so all of that started with music. I started
Seriously.
teaching myself piano when I was 4 or 5. I started writing music when I was 12. By the time I got out of high school, I went on the road. I had 2 sets of original material. I was turned into this award-winning performer. And since the time I was old enough to hold a hairbrush and pretend it was a microphone, all I ever wanted to be was a rock star.
Oh.
So that was if we had a manifestation class in 1969, which is how long ago it was, I was surely going to become a rock star. And at the same time, I started to go to my friend's mom. Her name was Eunice. And he just said in high school, I was in high school. He's like, come and see what my mom does. I was like, what does your mother do? You got to. And she was a channel. We didn't call it that, but she had this big picture of Jesus and she'd light a candle and she'd close her eyes. And she said she went out into outer space and she didn't remember a thing, but she said the most incredible things that were it's like she was reading my mind. And she was describing the emotional state that I was in. I grew up in a very turbulent, traumatic household. And so most of that work with her was not about figuring out the future or world peace. It was about self-love. So I would have readings with her and she predicted I was going to be playing my music in front of great crowds. And my music had this healing quality. And I was going to be traveling the world, healing the world with my music. So those two pathways were intertwined to that. In 1987, I started to spontaneously automatic write. And that was a surprise, but not, because I knew what it was from her, but still it was like, what? And I was typing, I was like, well, who are you then? Because Eunice was always an antenna. There wasn't angels, there wasn't Einstein. It was just, she was picking up my higher power. And they said, we're sound. And as somebody who'd been writing music since I was 12, I was kind of okay with that. And it was the same process of writing music where I would go out into the nothing, listen for words, and I get a little bit of it and I'd be able to bring it out and until I had the whole song. And that was the same thing as channeling. And I think it's the same thing as channeling when we refer to it in a more general sense than just someone who can talk to Einstein. We're channeling our lives. We're creating our lives. Scientists channel science. So when I started to automatic write, it was very shocking in a way. And I wrote for about a year. I would have people come over and they would sit over here and I would just write. And finally I thought, you have to speak. But it's scary. It's scary to speak because there's more weight when you have that sound behind it. But one day I was at a party and I just explained to everybody I was doing this experiment and cut me some slack. And it was so profound. I closed my eyes and it was like there was this wind blowing from my feet up through me. And then I just started to talk and I addressed everyone. We didn't record it. And then I opened my eyes, everyone was crying and people were like, whoa, my God. So I thought, I guess. So I started doing private readings. And in 1993, I wanted to do groups. What would these voices of we say to a group of people like Edgar Casey did or Jane Roberts? And I couldn't find anyone in my circle of friends. And then one day a woman named Teresa showed up at my door for a reading. And she sent her 6 girlfriends, and then she sent her best friend, Kim. And when Kim came that October of 1993, everything started to explode. And they started coming to my gigs, and we started to talk about it. And pretty soon, one day I thought, oh my gosh, here's my group. And I called them up, and Kim was like, oh, we were just talking about inviting you over for a group. And that was the beginning of learning that I could talk to dead people, that I could talk to the angels, and that there was this bigger thing going on than just, hey, look, I think I can channel. Let's see what happens. Because these angels said to us, we have a theory about how to bring peace to the world, and we need humans to test it on, because it's about a different way to tackle conflict, that the byproduct will be world peace. And so the three of us, that we were told, you volunteered and you were chosen. And we were like, yeah, what does that mean? Yes, but what are we doing? So we started channeling regular groups. And the second master group we channeled was called conflict resolution. And after that, conflict broke out amongst the three of us. And what it was not really important. It wasn't below the belt. It was about the work. My vision that we are God. And Kim was like, I'm not God, that kind of thing. And we had our first fight at my kitchen table, and we were all trying to be good, spiritual people. And it came to a point where it was just escalating and things were getting more heated. And suddenly I said, hey, we just did this called conflict resolution. Let's go get it and see what they tell us to do. And what it said was, if you're involved in a conflict, the root of your part of it is within you. And that was fairly revolutionary to me. I had anger issues, projection. That's how I lived my life, victimized. So my head sort of whipped around. I was like, what does this mean? But at the table, we all took it in and we cycled around a little bit, and then suddenly it was like, whoosh, and we all got it at the same moment and started crying simultaneously. And I was able to come back and say, here's what I need to do. Kim was able to come back and say, yes, and here's what I need to do. And from that came conflict revolution. Wow. And maybe the most important part of that story is that night I went to work I was playing at a hotel in Minneapolis, and there was a waitress there who just didn't like me, whatever, I don't care. But for 2 years, she never had a word to say to me. And I walked in that night and she could not get enough of me. Do you like Patti Smith? I've got some cassettes of hers. I can bring them to you. And she put $20 in my tip jar. And it took me halfway through the night and I went, oh my gosh, this is what they're talking about. When we change it within, it naturally will manifest outside us. So that was the beginning of that work. And then the next day, it's I know, and like I said, it's kind of a long story, but I want to get it all in there so you can kind of get the gist of how I got to Einstein. Right?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so great. we were told to write our diaries as we were going. So while we were going through all this in our fights, we were writing our diaries, and we published them as a book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels. And it came out in 1997. And the next year, my literary agent called me and said, I've got a call from a metaphysical tabloid in London looking for an interview with Princess Diana from Beyond the Grave on the 1-year anniversary of her death. And I'd never done such a thing. I was learning people who passed on could come to me and communicate and try to get me to their living. I never thought of going to someone who was dead and try to talk to them. Plus a tabloid. What in the world? So I thought, well, we've come this far. Let's see what happens. And I channeled the questions. I channeled the answers. I typed and printed and went to read, and it was overwhelming. It was so in-depth and it was so beautiful. And her whole point was, if everybody who put flowers in front of the palace would do conflict revolution, we would have world peace in a day. And of course the tabloids didn't want it, even though they spent 5 hours with me asking me about Princess Anne. So my agent and I said, maybe there's other famous dead people who want to talk. We made this long list, Elvis, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, whatever. And in my head, I'd imagine I'd go to him and say, Mother Teresa, do you want to talk? No, I'm tired. And so the next one up was Nicole Brown Simpson.
I never would have thought you would have said that. Wow. Okay, tell me.
Yes, and that was so profound. I learned so much in that one interview, because I always thought, we die and we go to that place where you're just all peaceful and nothing. Oh, not when you're murdered by your husband and then you have to leave your children behind with him. So she had a lot to say about how I'm not sure if you can say racism, if it's opposite of, if it's a white person. But anyway, she just described how that culture that he grew up in, and then why he was so abusive to her as he was sort of kissing up to the white culture in order to get his status. But he grew up in a home where, no, you didn't hang out with the white people. So he was going against this huge cultural thing. In any case, when we got to John F. Kennedy, which I can tell you in 2025 is a very profound interview, he told us, look, put your list away. We will tell you who's coming, because we're a group of souls in afterlife who have been working with you and the world to have world peace. And we didn't even have Einstein on the list. Shame on us. I suppose that's why they had to stop us and say, okay, Einstein, Albert Einstein. And when I channeled him and I spoke, this was the voice of every single reading I had ever given. This was the voice of sound. And in years that I've been through this journey, this was probably also the voice that was hanging out with me as a 4 or 5-year-old and pushing me up to the piano. He was very much a musician as well. And so when I channeled it, and it took me a couple of years to come to terms with that. I didn't tell anybody. It was angels. And it was really a profound interview. And in 2005, I thought, I love him so much. I'm not a scientist. I was never into math. All I wanted to do is be a rock star. But when I realized that this was the energy that had been with me my whole life, let's do a book just for you. So in 2005, I sat down, I did 6 channeling sessions, and then I set about to do the editing of his book. I had no idea what he was going to tell me. I had no idea how it was going to come down. And what happened was, in a nutshell, he said to me, I'm going to give you my unified field theory, which I never got to in life. And it includes what we call a map of human consciousness, which is how we as conscious beings interact with energy to create the physical world together. And the most profound, well, that was pretty profound, but he said he defined compassion as the 5th fundamental force of the universe, the creative intelligence that uses the 4 fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. And he set about to dictate through me his unified field theory. I had to, that book, I did some very rudimental maps, like maybe a scientist might if he was drawing on a napkin. And I published that book. It was very trying in the sense that he told me in 2005 that the source of everything is in the center of the earth. And it operates like a black hole. And being that I'm not a scientist and I have no idea, if I walk out into a stage and tell a bunch of people that the source is in the center of the planet and it operates like a black hole, am I going to get laughed off the stage if a scientist is in the room? Is this even possible? So I had to trust and go with it. And now, as I say, in 2025, I'm listening to physicist Brian Greene, who is one of the foremost string theorists, talk about not only are black holes not just big, like universe-eating mechanisms out in space, they can be as small as this. And he even thinks that the Earth itself originates in a black hole.
Confirming.
So it's that kind of stuff that is the synchronicity of it all is enormously exciting and magical. It makes my life unbelievably magical, but it is a challenge in a mental health capacity to embrace. I think it's what makes crazy people crazy. Einstein said, if you come across a schizophrenic or people who have been labeled insane or whatever, these are really the visionaries because they are not understood by culture. And I thought many times along the journey, okay, I get how that feels.
Every day I think I'm nuts.
Exactly. And I'm okay with it.
It seems that opinion is more prevalent than not, right? Meaning that I know a lot of women that question their sanity every single day. And I, like you stating about the schizophrenics and, that those were the visionaries, like that seems really possible for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as I've used the work, Conflict Revolution, to address the challenges, I'll say, brought on by doing the work, it's like they knew all along that that's what was going to be able to heal my PTSD trauma, neurodivergent, and then to be able to go on and be the change and the example for what happens when people like me, who really did go through 4 or 5 years there for a while of deep psychological challenges, that I didn't go. I had therapists, but I took I wasn't going to take any medication. I was going to use this process if it killed me to come through this. And it just was brilliant, just brilliant. So that's
Wow.
kind of me.
I love it. So, conflict revolution. So, do you find, I want to unpack what that all means, but I would imagine that someone with your bright light that goes out into the world wanting to talk about world peace and how quickly we can solve it is faced with a lot of resistance.
I am not a super popular YouTuber, and I'm okay with it, because you have to be willing. You have to be willing to go inside and do this work, and nobody can drag you there. You can be inspired by seeing other people do it. But as I was on kind of a big podcast with a lot of people, and the host said, "So, do you have a lot of followers?" I said, "You know what? I don't. I've been on YouTube forever. And I might have 250 followers, because everybody doesn't want to go into this deep scientific explanation and then do the incredibly hard work of owning all your stuff, owning
As
it
a
all."
Yeah, as a coach and hypnotherapist, and have been that way, since 2013, I see that. I'm just basing it off of an assumption. Like, what I would be recommending is the shadow work that you're kind of talking about, diving into all the stuff that we have hidden from ourselves. And no one wants to look at that.
Nope. And in terms of me as a channel, when I
Mhm.
started doing the groups with Kim and Teresa, the angels said to us, "This is not going to be a stopping place. This is not going to be about aggrandizing Barbara with. This is going to be about people who may come to us when we get to this point where it becomes a bigger function, rather than because it's about doing the work and bringing world peace, but because it's such an unusual story." So people might be drawn to it and get on the next great thing. And the beautiful part is, if they do, they don't come to a place where I'm demanding that you think of me as the one that's doing all this. We get you to do the work, and you get to find, even though you think you're going because everybody's doing it, it's the next great thing. And then you find yourself, and you find yourself love. And pretty soon you don't need me. Go forth and manifest.
Yeah. And what you're saying about doing your self work is so huge. And so part of my story is that I managed my dad's construction company for half of my life. And when I left in 2021, it was heated and it was hot and it was volatile, and we would scream and yell at each other. And I decided to finally quit. I said things that I probably shouldn't have never said to my father, but I did. So, but it has taken us 5 years to get to the point of our relationship has shifted so much. And it wasn't, like before, when there was so much friction between he and I was like, how do I get him to understand me? How do I get him to change? And then I was like, well, fuck that. And when I quit, I was like, what is it about him that bothers me that I need to look at within myself? And that has been the journey for the last 5 years. And it is wild how much our relationship has changed.
Baby. It's when we take that to the truth, that those of us who are spiritual, or even, the religious people, the truth that we're all one, there cannot be any separation from your dad. If your dad is triggering, if you're involved in and it's in you, and you revolve it there and you fix it there, what the unified field theory that he presented and the maps of human consciousness do is show you the theoretical science of why, when we do this, it manifests completely differently in the lens. And like Einstein said, in real life, he said, we can't go at the problems at the same level we're creating them. We can't go at them in the lens of physical world where they're already manifesting. We need to step back and go into this map of human consciousness and make the changes here. And it is, like you say, that's what you're doing. And it's brilliant. It is the miraculous manifestation that everyone is looking for.
Yes. So you are on a world tour. Tell me all about that.
In 2023, I left everything I was doing. Now, you see, I've been doing this work for decades, but I always had a little side gigs and this and that in the arts and this and that. I'm a designer. And I thought, no, I have this incredible body of work. The world is so in need of it now. It's been in need, but never before has it been in need, where people are desperate now. How can I help stop this runaway train of World War III? And so I left everything and I launched myself on this tour. And I started, it was sort of like, I want to say Jesus, like I'm Jesus, but Jesus never planned where he was going. He'd just get up in a day and he'd walk out his, now he had 12 people helping organize. But I just thought, this first year, I'm just going to follow my nose. And so it turned out for 3 months in the winter, I had all these pet sitting gigs all across the UK and Europe.
Wow.
So I was able to, in that work, in that time, find the spiritualist churches, talk to people. I had a couple of speaking engagements. I also, I ended up in Belgium and Paris and Bucharest, and I would just end up at a peace rally. Like I'd walk out my door, my hotel, and there'd be this big, protest or peace rally or women's rights. And then at the end of that, I came to speak at the first time the Science of Consciousness conference last April. I didn't get to actually speak. I just had they called it a poster session, where you made a big poster and stood there and talked to people. And I left that feeling like I am so on the right track. This is so what it is. And I'd had this reading in Bucharest. We did this Einstein reading, and he said, when you get home, things are going to start to elevate for our mission that we've been working on for so long. And sure enough, I got back last spring and I started to get these bookings on these much bigger access podcasts and started to put together this bigger plan of what my next year is going to be like. And the same thing, I wasn't really sure. When I left last November, I leave the island and travel down to Georgia, where I've been wintering with my friend Debbie. And this winter I had stayed put and I created 2 online courses. One is kind of a very basic conflict resolution basics. Like you want to get into it, get down and dirty. And then another one is a master class on the unified field theory for those people who really want to study the details of that. And I decided I'm going to, because this is the 70th anniversary this year of the Russell Einstein Manifesto, which was Einstein's last paper that he wrote before he died. And it was a plea to the world leaders to resolve their conflicts peacefully. Otherwise, no one will survive World War III. And
what year did he write that?
55. And that was the year I was born. And I always say, the year he died, the year I was born. And I always say, who else but Einstein would die, go into the afterlife, figure it all out, figure out how to coerce 3 women to come together to test his theory while he's pretending he's an angel, although I do think there was angelic presence there. And then go on to channel his unified field theory, which then I will be able to, in July at this conference, Nissan Harriman, Deepak Chopra, the biggest names in consciousness, I get to channel Einstein with a message for them on the 70th anniversary of his last paper. And crazy overwhelming when I set out 2 years ago going, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to trust the process. And here I am.
There's 2 things that I would love for you to expound upon for our audience. And one is what it feels like when you know you're on the right track. And then the other literally just escaped my mind.
Well, I'll answer the first one. You'll remember the second one because that's how we work. When you know that you're aligned to compassion, when you know you're in touch with your intuition, when you're working in your greatest good, how does that feel? Is that the question?
That's exactly the question.
Yeah. So for me, what it feels like is that emotions, like feelings, have stopped being so separate and distinct. The roller coaster we've all been on. One suddenly, you're crying, you can be on the top of the wave. it's become more like an energy, and it shifts. I get really happy and sad, but there's something surrounding it. It's like this force. It's like this power that is like it almost is like a capsule or holding in this consciousness that's supporting it and loving it. And my intellect is so calm. It's not inactive, but I was telling my morning class today that when we're talking about manifestation, it's not what's going on out there. Because if you're listening to your intuition, sometimes your intuition is going to say, stop. And then it gets into your intellect, and your intellect is going to go, I can't stop. I need to do this and this and this and this and this. And then you take the decision to go against your intuition. And we all know what that feels like. We get sick. We have conflicts where our heads are going. When you're in line and intuition says, stop, intellect goes, whew, okay. And the challenge becomes that space internally between that intuitive impelling and the next one that's going to make you take a step. Because what happens in that space, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. I must be wrong. Maybe I have to. There's so much activity that goes on that doubts us, right? Oh, I'm not intuitive. That can't be the real message. So that's the space where the most important work takes place.
I understand now why I forgot my second question, because it was faith. How do you lean into the faith? And that's exactly what you're talking about, from this moment to that moment. And when the activity starts, how do you lean into the faith that it's all going to turn out?
I think faith is about empirical experience. I am not a big person that thinks we should just believe everything or anything. Is that it took me a lot of skepticism and a lot of empirical experience. And what I used to do was I'd start it with Eunice's readings, and she would make these predictions. And then I continued it on. I started reading tarot cards, and then on with us. I would say, throw a tarot card reading. I'd write it down. I'd write down what I think it meant. Then I would go off and live my life. And I would come back, read the reading, and go, oh, here's what this really meant. Here's what I thought it meant. So I was empirically learning my own filters, and miscalculations. And then when you do it enough, where, for example, I used to have this exercise I'd teach people where, okay, go on a road trip. This is what I did. And I'd get to Eau Claire, and I needed to find the Barnes and Noble. And I would say to myself, which of the 4 exits? And the first thing I heard was the 4th. And I said to myself, but if I take the first one, I can drive by all the other ones just in case. So I did. And of course, where was it? It was at the 4th exit. So the next time I was able to suspend that doubt when I heard, where's the best coffee shop? First exit, turn right. Okay. Oh, sure. That's really going to happen. Exactly. So it's learning empirically how to trust yourself, how the system works. And the work that you do, you help people understand how their systems work so they can master them. So they don't have to be victims to what their emotions are, what their thoughts are.
And where I come into my own conflict is when it gets turned over to the intellect, right? And my intellect's like, oh, I can push this, or yes, I can force it, or I'm just so focused on the mission, right? That I just am self-forgetting and I forget all of the other things. And the dance for me has been to be able to take that step back and then witness it on a full screen of kind of what you're saying, and be like, because I know that that force has been my biggest challenge, or what I perceive to be force.
And where we take what you've just described so well is that when we get into our witness, we're looking for 3 things. We're looking for how to process these, what we call the 3 human dimensions. And this is what comes forth with in this operating system. We have these 3 human dimensions, and they each have a different function and a different form and a different way that you deal with them if they're out of alignment. So just like when your heart, something's wrong, you do one thing. When your stomach. So emotion is the sort of the primordial soup of creation. It's the fuel that's fueling all of the physical reality. And these are very specific definitions to our model. And then you have intuition, which is the impelling, telling you to take the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole. And it's always the next step, the small step. And then you have the intellect, which is there to define. But here is where free will has been placed by God. So if you're going to turn left, it's here in the functioning that the information goes down your arm and grabs the wheel. It's not here. You can be told by your intuition to turn left, but this is where the functioning. So if this part of you is not in line with this, it's going to do exactly what you said. I can't turn left. I need to go right. And when we surrender to that, this is my experience, is that there's this period of developing faith. It's empirically knowing. It's like, I know this is going to happen. It's not even, it's beyond faith. It's just that I know, I've shown if I do this, then this happens, kind of math. And you get to that place. There's this, and the best way I can describe it is that I was doing a really intensive 3-day fast. And I got to day 2.5 and I said to myself, I'm done. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. This has been great. And I got up and I went and made the smoothie again. And I watched myself in my intellect decide, well, I'm going to do this. And I watched my body say, I don't think so. And now I'm to this place where the more I surrender, the more incredible things happen. So who doesn't want to, right?
Yeah. So do you have a tip for me to lean into surrender?
Yes,
Okay.
very much. It's that the most misunderstood part of us is that emotion as an energy and intellect as an energy are two absolutely completely different things. Like the stomach is different from the heart, and we deal with them differently to regenerate them. But what happens is emotion flows up, goes into it informs intuition. So the more we feel, the more intuitive we become. Intuition says, do this. And then it gets up into our head and it triggers thoughts, forms. And those are informed by, sometimes by childhood patterns. If I speak up, I'm going to get slapped. So there's all kind of subatomic things that are also triggering it. And then they meld and they create reality. So on a real level of creating, the phone, that's how it works. But also to create our reality and our lives. So when we pull them apart and we realize that emotion is this fuel and we want it all, and you process it with your breath and you keep it away from thought, unless it's going to be the thought of what you want to manifest, what's for the greatest good. And then with thought, when you do that and you start to, you have some kind of, my affirmation was, I don't need to know why I feel mad. I just need to sit here and breathe and feel it and then go through it. And it processes much faster.
Yeah.
But it doesn't trigger the thought. Let's say it's anxiety. You have all these thoughts that describe anxiety. Mm-hmm. And when you take the emotion away, these weaken. And with your witness, you're able to say, wait a minute, I'm going to put this one in. I don't need to know why. And so now you're not fueling those thoughts. I'm mad at my sister, and the anger's so I think that is the biggest misconception that we have about our energy. And it's the most powerful transformation that comes really super quickly. When you do that separation, you're going to see it happen like that when you process your emotion like that.
Just going to go out on a limb and tell you I'm obsessed with your life's work. Like, this is really exciting. And there's so many juicy nuggets that remind me, so the hypnotherapy certification that I went through was channeled. And it's called Pause, and it was channeled by the hypnotherapist. And but she talked a lot about, and in my work, we talk a lot about we have people recall an experience and then learn how to dissect the emotions from the story. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And
Yes.
It's been so powerful just to understand that. And it also reminds me of the work of Dr. Sue Morter, who talked about, because once you name something, right, then you're going to obsess about the name. Like, think of a medical diagnosis. People are like, I want to know what's wrong with me. And they come in and they're like, oh, I'm diabetic. And then it becomes a thing. It becomes a mask or an identity that I have to be diabetic. And yeah, go.
And just so when you have the emotion, oh my gosh, I'm diabetic, whatever, and you feed it to the thought, now your cells are actually creating diabetes. It's not diabetes comes and now you have to figure it out. It's the other way around. But go on. I'm sorry.
That was perfect. So in some of my work with women that have sexual trauma, they come in and they're like, I want hypnosis because I want to go to the exact moment where I was victimized or molested or raped or whatever, experience this horrible atrocity. And they want to remember that. And I'm like, actually, we don't. We just want to process it out of your body. We don't want to know it. We don't want to know who did it. We don't want to know any of that. We just want to get the shit out. And
Absolutely.
yeah, your work. I'm going to have to sign up for your master classes and just dive right into all of it. The books.
I hope you do. It's really great. And you know, shoot, now I lost my train, but
That train goes fast.
well, there's so many things to talk about, you know, and there's so
Yeah.
many levels of it.
So someone's just starting out with the basics. Where would you recommend that they start?
I would recommend I'm just now getting up my 12-week conflict resolution challenge. And it's part of my I'm looking for the participation of the willing, because you have to be willing to do this work,
Oi.
to take part in what I'm calling a worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war by doing this inner work with conflict resolution or whatever form of conflict, because clearly we do the same work. So it doesn't have to be conflict resolution. So I've created this 12-week structure of what we're going to do, how you do conflict resolution, down and dirty. And then I also have a workbook, and this is all free. I have a workbook for the 12 weeks where every week we're going to concentrate on a different aspect of the whole model. So maybe the first week, I can't remember, but we'll really dive into intellect. And we'll send you out that week in your witness, paying attention to what's going on in your intellect. Then you make notes. And then you also have to report what happens. What do you manifest once you revolve that conflict there? And usually, if it's a conflict with a person, either the person disappears or they rise to the occasion. And so I'm really excited about this, because I wished I would have had this 2 years ago when I started the whole thing, but it's taken me this long to put this together. And that's where I would say, and I think we have so many, like we've got 7 books in our library. The Diaries of Psychic Sorority. If you're into girl groups and you want to know about me and Teresa and Lily and the very first origins, it's an unbelievable story. And even I'm here at Teresa's here in North Carolina after all of these years. It's just an amazing story. And then I've got all the Einstein books and conflict resolution books, and you can find all that, of course, on barbarawith.com.
And your 12-week program, is that self-study or
Yeah.
okay. So, but there still is the accountability piece of checking in and letting everybody know what you manifested, which is fantastic.
This is all you.
Okay.
And you just document it and
Okay.
write it down and do your own self-study work. Then the next thing I have a very down and dirty conflict resolution course where I'm teaching you and I'm walking you through and I'm taking you through my conflicts and my sample conflict and bring you to this remarkable ending. And then the third offering I have is the master class that is everything. And it's Einstein's unified field theory, the maps of human consciousness, the science of compassion, how it all works, how it all puts together. And then we go through conflict resolution. And what it shows you, as I said, is why scientifically, as within, so without, works. And then all my books and such. So I've got all kinds of different things. I got a million YouTube videos too.
I could just spend all day talking to you.
But
many things to ask.
Let me offer you and your listeners a special too.
I love that. Thank you.
It's that if you go to my barbarawith.com and you want a reading, buy a half-hour reading and I'll give you an hour. It's kind of like a half price, but it's just easier to. But have your listeners reach out and just say, I heard you on Marcie's show and you made this offer, and we can go from there.
That's very generous. I appreciate that very much. I love this conversation. So remind me again when you're going to be at the 70th reunion.
The 70th anniversary.
Thank you.
Science of Consciousness Conference in Barcelona in July 8th is when I speak. And the 9th is the actual anniversary. But my presentation is on the 8th.
Okay. I might have to find my way to Barcelona.
Otherwise, this is just the beginning of this whole new phase. I hope to bring this worldwide.
Yeah, I can feel it for you. For
Thank
sure.
you.
Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for all of the wisdom that you just provided to my audience. I just really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. You'll see my name come across, I'm sure, your CRM registering for your 12-week self-study class. And I'm definitely taking you up on the reading. So,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right. And we'll touch base after the conference too, and let your readers, your listeners know how it went.
Yes, please. Thank you
All
so
right.
much for your
Thank
time.
you.